Hey guys, Grumpy Uncle Pat here. I don't know, I was just sitting, I just finished tattooing and I'm talking with one of my clients about values and, trying to become a better person. It's another guy who's gotten sober recently in the last few years, and he's done the 12-step program and he's done all of this different, self-work in different categories of his life, trying to do evaluation on different areas of his life that maybe you're not addicted to or he wasn't addicted to, but it doesn't mean that you don't need to work on it, right? Like whether it's temper or, I don't know, your sexuality or your relationship with food, or maybe you're like a video game person and you're spending an exorbitant amount of time on gaming or social media. Hell, you're probably watching this on YouTube or maybe TikTok and doing evaluation on how much you're using this as opposed to, maybe it's using you. And I think that's pretty valid in a lot of technological society, that we could probably evaluate how much we're using it and how much we're allowing it to use us. I read somewhere that if something is free, you're paying for it by being the product. And I think that that's something to consider when it comes to a lot of these things, like social media, at least. But so as an individual, and then we've got this hierarchy of noble virtues, right? Of things that we know through our development of discernment and understanding the principles of right and wrong and good and bad, doing the math on what are fundamentally good virtues. The term virtue is something that you strive towards. It separates the bad people from the good people, bad behavior from good behavior. And understanding that one of the most important principles is to understand discernment, the ability to understand what is good and what is less good. So if we're sitting here and we're floating around on materialism like that, we think that materialism is the only important thing in the world, and what I can attain, what my property is, what my pleasure is, sexual fulfillment, ego fulfillment, status, that kind of stuff. And once we finish that, we can do whatever we want, or we can do whatever we want to get those things. That's a really materialist way of looking at life. And then you can look at the transcendental parts of life that are more principled, that take us above materialism towards, I guess, virtue or transcendental values and principles, things like loyalty and honor and dignity, or generosity and compassion, the things that make a community better, that make us better for trying to achieve those things, and not just being stuck on a root material level. When we start striving to be higher than our material desires or passions, or the monks, the Christian monks would say the earthly pleasures, right? And as we could check our desires, that's what the Buddhists call it, that suffering comes from desire. And if we could check our suffering, if we could check our desires, we could check our suffering. So once we could say materialism is here, but what we should be striving for is more transcendental virtues, we could start recognizing what keeps us stuck in a materialistic attitude and which things take us to the next level in our human achievement, right? Now, at the same time, if materialism is here and we're stuck in materialism, consider this for a while. If we think materialism is only good, what kind of things drag us down? What things pull us further into materialism that we start devolving into immorality? So yeah, our transcendental values would be morality, and our materialist degeneration would start being immorality or degeneration. And we can take a look at the worst things that we see in society, like the sexual assaults and the violence and the hatred and all of these things. The real toxic things, and by the way, toxic means poisonous, right? So the things that are poisoning us are generally the things that are developed by thinking materialism is the only good. And as we slide down, we start devolving into immorality and the things that we know are bad, right? So you've got transcendental virtue, materialism, and immorality and degeneration. So we're all existing materially. We live in a material world. I'm just a material girl. But the fact of the matter is, we should strive to be better. We should strive higher for a better life, for the common good, for our communities, for our families, for those that we love, and for us, because we will benefit by being a better person. While if we're here on a material level and we keep just diving into material desire and passion, That's when creepy stuff happens. When you think that materialism is the only world and consequence be damned, that's when you get into addiction. That's when you get into fraud and thieving and like all kinds of sketchy behavior because you don't care about the consequences. Now, depending on whether you're a philosophical, like spiritual individual or not, you can say karma isn't real. There is no ultimate consequence for our behavior on the material realm. And that's fine, I guess. Maybe you're not metaphysical, you're not spiritual, you don't have to believe that. But on a pure physical, material level, this also applies. There are direct and immediate consequences for every action that we do. It's the law of cause and effect in physics, that for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So anything I do today is going to affect me tomorrow. I wake up in the morning as a result of the choices I made today. And maybe the holy men back in the day carried this over to say, well, if death is the ultimate sleep, the life you wake up next is going to be a consequence of the life you live today. Or maybe they just looked at that principle of consequence and action and said, well, man, if you don't want negative consequences, maybe you better make positive choices in the moment. So I think this is an important thing to consider if we're trying to rise or fall in our life, if we're trying to make better or worse choices, and learning the discernment to recognize which of our choices are going to lead us to negative consequences, either physically, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, depending on your system of belief. But I know the First Nations medicine wheel, that those are the 4 quadrants. So pay attention to the consequences that this is going to have. Like maybe a physical action is going to have negative emotional and psychological consequences, even though it's got a positive physical reaction, you know? Having a relationship with an inappropriate partner or whatever it is might feel good in the moment, but it's going to leave some emotional and psychological or maybe even spiritual repercussions that you were not prepared for, right? Or the drugs that you choose to do might feel good in the moment, but you're going to have some physical consequences that you're not prepared for on top of an emotional or psychological, or depending on your system of belief, your spiritual consequences. So yeah, make good choices, you know, or try to make better choices. You don't have to be perfect. We all fucking works in progress, but just try to make some better choices, right? It'll pay off in the long run. I promise. Peace, love, granola, folks. Keep it real.